All right, you've been warned. We're about to get all geeky with the Trident CRB from Krytac in this episode of the Gear Guide. So you know from watching our first Krytac video that we were really amazed with all the external changes they made on this AEG and all the improvements they've done to build around the version 2 platform for their Trident series. But we never got to really what's under the hood. So we're gonna go walk through this gun and show you in detail and explain what Krytac has done to improve upon the M4 version 2 platform. So starting here in the back, they went with a new motor. They went with a 30,000 RPM motor. Now for you geeks out there, they went with a 21 TPA, as turns per armature winding on this motor. And what that gives you is a really torquey but balanced torquey response. In fact, it's so powerful that some shops are actually getting 22 rounds a second on a 150 spring. We're talking 500 feet per second plus spring at 22 a second on a stock AEG motor, which is really impressive. And as we trace those wires up on into the body, of course, we discussed the MOSFET. And this is something we're probably gonna see a lot of other AEGs follow suit, but in the Krytac, they went with a traditional non-active braking MOSFET, so there wouldn't be any technical issues for the people who are uninitiated to MOSFETs, but still a really robust one that can handle all the power of that motor in pretty much any battery you can throw at it within reason. And what you get out of that MOSFET, of course, is all the stress is taken off the trigger contacts. You're not gonna burn them out. You actually get a much snappier response and resistance to higher voltage batteries. In fact, some people out there really claim a gun can't be LiPo ready unless you have a MOSFET. Not gonna get into that debate right now, but this one does have you covered with a stock MOSFET that's covered under their factory warranty. Now, moving up into the guts of the mech box, this is where everything matters, but let's pause on the mech box shell itself. It looks really unique. It's serialized, which is a great touch. And from what I understand, they really stepped up on the metal on the external build of this mech box. Now, I don't have all the specs, but just looking at it and checking it out, you can tell they've really stepped up the alloy they're using in this mech box, something that's way stronger than what you're gonna get from your average off-the-shelf AEG. The gears themselves look really solid and they nest nicely in the 8mm caged bearing bushings. Now, if you guys are familiar with different kinds of bushings, there's a lot of different ones. There's solid metal ones, there's sleeve bearing, which are of course the ball bearings in there. They opted for a Japanese steel caged bearing bushing, which is considered pretty darn premium and something you're not gonna see again in very many AEGs on the market today, and it's usually considered an aftermarket upgrade. And the spring guide is something you'd expect from a high-end AEG as well. It not only is the quick change spring version, where you still have to take the mech box at least down to a certain point to get to it, but you don't have to open the mech box shell, it also has a bearing sleeve bushing on the bottom to allow that spring to rotate freely and not get bound or twisted under stress. Moving on internally, the tappet plate and fire selector plates look like they're made of a pretty solid polymer as well. And moving up to the piston, it is a 4 metal tooth piston with the remainder being polymer. They've done a really good job lining up the angle of engagement. You'll have techs that debate what is the perfect amount. I believe this one, and don't quote me, is sitting at around 12:30, 12 o'clock and a half on the AOE pickup, and they removed that next to last tooth to allow for an easier pickup and longevity on that piston itself. And for those of you who are going, oh, well, hey, the piston's mostly polymer, why? You really do need a single point of failure in any mech box. So I think they made a really good choice going with the polymer piston rather than sticking with a full metal tooth piston, because if you're gonna reinforce everything else under the hood, you do need something that after a long time can take the fall when something is time to go. Now, moving up in front of the piston, you have their cylinder head. And the cylinder's head itself actually has an O-ring for seal around the cylinder and a rubber pad, so when the piston pounds away at it, it actually absorbs some of that shock and gives more longevity to the internal parts. The air nozzle itself is pretty much a standard offering, and I think this is the one part where I kind of would have liked to have seen them put an O-ring in there just for better seal. Now, understand, I didn't have any sealing problems at all. It was actually sealed up really great even without that O-ring, but it's just one of those things after time and wear and tear. I would have liked to have seen that part, and that's probably my only criticism inside this mech box. And to round it all out, we're done with the mech box, but we're not done with all the thought that went into the internals. Now, we talked about the hop-up chamber in the past, how it has that dial and the numbers and how it clicks into place so you can go, okay, I know I'm running a 0.28, so my hop-up needs to be set at 14. fantastic touch, but what we didn't touch on was the material they used for the bucking itself. Not only did they go with like a V-shaped bucking where it actually gets a better contact patch around the BB for a more straight trajectory, they also went with a silicone polymer on the bucking itself, and that way it's not going to be porous, absorb oils and lubrication that might come off of the mech box, or you, for example, cleaning your mags and things like that, and not swell up. We've seen that happen on other guns where they use like a rubber type material that is a little more porous. You'll have that swell the bucking and you'll cause jams or other potential issues. And going with a reinforced silicone polymer gives you the strength of the rubber, but not the porous properties as well, so you're not going to have that bucking swell. Again, it really is apparent that they've spent a lot of time inside this gun looking at all the little tiny things that need to be upgraded in your off-the-shelf AEG. So guys, if you really wanted to know what was in their hood, now you do. And if you've ever wanted a gun that is an amazing base for an insane build, or you just want something that's built like a tank for long-term abuse, you guys definitely want to check out the Krytac Trident lineup. Of course, the CRB being one of the 4 that are on the market right now at the end of 2014. And you can pick these up for around $300 to about $400, depending on the version you're looking for, at your local or online authorized Krytac retailer. So guys, I've got to ask you a question. How much do internals matter to you? Is it a price thing? I mean, when you guys go and look at an AEG, especially a premium one, do the externals really matter the most? Is that what you guys look at when you're going to make that investment? Or do you do a lot of research online to see what's under the hood, to see what you're gonna get from longevity and build quality? Let me know down there in the comment section below. And guys, that's it for this episode of the Gear Guide. I'll be back in the next episode where I review a 105mm airsoft gun that shoots shells at a range of 500 yards.